Mm. So welcome everyone to today's live session. Today being Tuesday, June 18th. I had a momentary lapse there, sorry. Our schedule or our agenda for today, of course, is subject to change based on your needs and questions and so on, is about 15 minutes of Q&A and review, followed by an overview of Module 3.2, which is today's module. That'll be about 30 minutes or so. We'll go ahead and take a break at that time so that everybody can stretch or get something to snack on or whatever. And by the way, feel free to eat and drink while we are together and chit-chatting. I'm pretty casual with these sessions, so as you probably noticed, I drink all the time while we're otherwise I wouldn't be able to talk by the end. After that, we'll start on doing a backward design of a lesson just to kind of put into practice some of the concepts from the Module 3.2 overview. And then we'll do a little wrap up. Should be about an hour and a half total. And we had fun last time, earlier today in the earlier session. So let me see. All right. So first, any questions? Any questions at all about anything that's happened so far? As in weeks 1 and 2, or just any questions in general?
Yeah, just a general questions. So last week we only had one live session, right? And this week we have full days, 2 live sessions per day. So for the going forward, we're gonna look like gonna be one session per week or multiple sessions, live sessions per week. They're just curious.
So weeks 3, 4, and 5 all have 4 sessions each week.
Okay.
That I've been adding like alternative timeframes to meet because we are scattered across 3 continents. So you only have to attend. So technically there are 8 sessions this week, 8 sessions next week, and then 8 sessions in week 5, which is after 4th of July holiday. But you only have 4 each week. Okay. And you can see, let me see. So in week 3, you can see the list of live sessions. And then in week 4, have I updated week 4 yet? Week 4, I've already added a second session here, but I will be adding other sessions, and it's going to follow the same routine. So like this is 10 and 2, so this one will be 2 and 6 on Monday. And then this one will be 10 and 2, and then this one will be 2 and 6 again. So, but I'll update that soon.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I ask for the final project? So it's impossible we can change our topic or some ideas after 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would rather have you work on something you're interested in rather than just working on something because you started it. So if you need to change your ideas, go ahead and just on your template that you've been working on, just line out the original stuff and put in new things, and then I'll give you some feedback. Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Any other questions? All right, let's jump to the review. just a quick few questions for you. I'm going to start with Alice. Alice, can you tell me something that stood out for you in yesterday's session?
Yesterday's sessions we are talk about active learning. If I don't make a mistake, right? Because I'm not so young, so sometimes my memory is very short. But yes, as far as I remember, yeah, yes, for me is the day before yesterday. The session we focused on the active learnings, and also we discussed how to I think brainstorming, about the final project, right? And then talk about your final your learning, your teaching planning, right? Which is focused on the hobby. Yeah, I remember that's a hobby, right? And our peers give different kinds of the suggestions and how to promote at learnings regarding the hobby, this topic, these themes. Yeah, this is what I remember up to now.
Great. Was there anything in particular of all of that that really excited you or made you think about something you might do differently in your lesson design or in your teaching?
Yeah, and especially active learning, this topic is really impressed me a lot, because I used to, when I make a, the unit design, before I used to focus more about the target, about the how to organize, organize these instructions, the step by step. It's not pay much attention to active learning, right? And I think this is because we are still traditionally focused on teachers, not get the students as a center, right? So this is a very impressed me, and since then I think I will put more efforts on the students as a student-centered, design or teaching planning, and rather teacher-centered. So this is very, very interesting to me. Yeah, I keep in mind, but sometimes I easily forget that. I think I need to, as that, I think as that article, yesterday I do the annotations by hypothesis. I read the article, and really this article, really, I learn a lot from this article. Especially especially there's a sentences is really, really impressed me. And as it said, we have to look backward and forward when we do the unit design based on this flow chart, right? We have to check if every, every sessions we align, if it's aligned with this standard, if we align with this flow chart, if we ignore something, or if we we have to constantly check back and forward among these elements to make sure that everything right in good track. I don't know how to say that, SYNC. But according to my understanding is if everything is in good track, in right track, based on this flow chart. This is really, really impressed me a lot. Yeah, I will keep in mind when I do the unit planning next time. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you. Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to diagram out, or, to present diagrams like this one that shows a design process. But honestly, design, whether it's design like fashion design or design of a lesson unit or even design of a rocket that we're sending to space, it's never a linear process. It's very chaotic. There's move 2 steps forward, double check in the back, and maybe go off on one tangent or another, and all of this stuff keeps informing what we have to write on paper is a linear process, but it never is. It really never is. So
Yeah, Bethany, may I ask another question?
Mhm.
Just as you know, it showed on this noted page,
Mhm.
and I asked a question, but up to now nobody answered me. I asked if there are some relevant criteria constantly to be used to.
This one?
No, the last one. Yeah, I totally, yeah, this one.
Oh,
Yeah,
this one.
yeah. If there's
Yes,
some relevant
we're gonna look
criteria
at that
constantly.
today. So I will be partially answering that question, I think, for you. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So a quick thank you for that. Thank you. Quick. Wow. All right. Recap. Just as a quick review again. So yesterday or the day before, in our previous session, we talked about the community of inquiry and how important it was to consider building in activities and teaching in ways that increased social presence, that is interactions among students and between the teacher and the students, that are more personal and social. These can be very useful for supporting cognitive presence later on. Some people really need to feel connected personally with other individuals before they can learn. So that's the emphasis on social presence. The emphasis on cognitive presence is, of course, getting students to cognitively engage with the materials that you're teaching them. And then teaching presence, things that you can do to set the climate so students can work with one another comfortably, safely, and using their brains. And also doing the other things that teachers normally do, like providing feedback and selecting really great resources for the learning task at hand, and so on. And then we talked about, as you heard, active learning, which we focused on two things. We focused on doing things to make sure, and this is part of cognitive presence, it's doing things, providing activities, encouraging students in various ways to not be passive learners, to not just sit and listen and then think that that's all they need to do to learn something. They need to work with the content. They need to read deeply. They need to ask questions. They need to make connections. And we need to encourage them to do that by providing activities that ask them to organize the information we're giving them and organize the skills that we're providing them, and to make connections to prior knowledge, to try and recall things as much as possible through the use of everything from flashcards to practice quizzes and everything in between, and practicing, and more practicing. So that was a little bit about yesterday. Any other questions before we go on? All right. Now we're going to get into Module 3.2, and really Module 3.2, the main themes or ideas or concepts for this are alignment, learning objectives, backward design, and integrated performance assessment. Now, before I go any further, I just want to ask, and give me a thumbs up or a yes or no in the chat. Are you familiar with backward design? Had you heard of it or used it at all before this class? So I got a no. Another no. And this is okay, by the way. If it's new, that's fine. It's new to a lot of people. Right? What about integrated performance assessment? New to you or old hat? Vivian, you're used to integrated performance assessment?
I hope I didn't misunderstood it. It's, I mean, I kind of like understanding it into like octavo, like interpreted the 5C. Is that something?
That's
What
what
it
we're
meant?
talking about. Yes, ACTFL's integrated
Okay.
performance assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, our school district are very strict with that, and that's actually something I'm trained from my teaching program, so that's something I'm familiar with.
Wonderful. Everybody take note of that. Vivian, tomorrow at one of the sessions, I would love if you joined in helping me since you're fresh from training, okay? Because I think you have more, I have more theoretical knowledge in this, not more than you, but just I have a lot of theoretical knowledge in this area, but you've been applying it in an actual classroom. So the more that tomorrow we're going to be tackling this particular topic in more detail. The more that you can help out, I would be grateful. Okay. Not to put you on the spot. All right. So let's start with alignment. The concept of alignment in a nutshell just means that what you say, what you tell the students that they need to learn is what you are in fact assessing, teaching, and providing resources for. And that might seem like, well, of course that's what we do, but it's really easy. Sorry. It is really easy to, my computer's going crazy, to misalign your learning objectives, your assessments, your learning activities, and your resources. It's really easy to either miss an objective that was near and dear to your heart for your students to tackle, or to inadvertently include some resources or activities that don't address an objective that you intended for the students to learn. So we are going to really focus on alignment as we work through week 3 and beyond. Okay. And so we're going to start with standards and objectives. Now, this goes back to the question that Alice had earlier, which is, are there certain standards? What was the exact question? Relevant criteria to be used for identifying the performance tasks. So, and the answer is yes. It's the World Readiness Standards. And the performance descriptors are a good start. And I'm going to put 2 links into the chat. All right. For you. For future reference, but don't get sidetracked, okay? So go ahead and open those up and bookmark them. And they will be on the slides, and the slides will be posted if you need a reference. But they will help you. The World Readiness Standards, and this is text straight from ACTFL, the ACTFL, World Readiness Standards and Performance Descriptors pages. World Readiness Standards describe what the students will learn. Here's an example from the interpretive communication, the C, communication C. Students understand and interpret written and spoken language on a variety of topics. That's the standard. Okay. Now you can see that's a very high level standard. There's a lot of directions you can take that, and a lot of levels novice, intermediate, advanced that would apply to. So we have to start drilling down when we start with a backward design process and we start with the standard. Okay. So we look at this big level overview. This might be a standard for the entire course, one of many standards for the entire course that you're teaching. Students understand and interpret written and spoken language. Now, this is great as a target, like, woo, this is what I'm aiming for from a teacher perspective, but it's not very helpful from it needs to be more specific for course design and for lesson planning and unit planning and activity, deciding on activities and resources. So one of the ways that we do narrow that and focus it more is we talk about the performance descriptors. We talk about how well the student can do the what. All right. And that is in the proficiency guidelines. This was one of the links. The standards was one of the links I put in the chat. Okay. There's a bunch. There's the communication standards, the culture standards, the connection standards, comparisons, communities, right? You've all heard of the 5 C's, I'm sure. And that document goes into a little bit more detail to help you out if you want to read that. But once you have the standard, then we want to look at the proficiencies, the performance descriptors. And let's say we want to look at the novice level reading. And there's the novice level reading, the overall. And I'm not going to get to, I encourage you to look at these, but I am not going to make you go this in depth at this point. There are parameters of performance and blah, blah, blah. What I do expect you to be able to do is find the appropriate overall performance description for the different standards to help guide your writing of learning objectives. All right. So there's that one. And if I go back to this, there it is right there. So this is how well do they understand and interpret the written and spoken language? They understand words and phrases and formulaic language. Now, you all are familiar with this. This is the beginner, right? This is novice level we're talking about, where you're teaching the students. This is how you say hello. And this is how somebody says hello back to you. This is how you introduce yourself. This is what they would say. That very formulaic, very scripted kind of understand of words and phrases that the students learn at first and rehearse, right? So that's how well. So at the novice level, we're now looking for creative use on language, 20 different ways to say something in various registers, for example. Anyway, so that's the performance descriptors. And these are what can be used to help identify the learning objectives, right? Which will then be used to develop the activities and the assessments and so on. And I just want to point out that, again, this is very general. It's more specific than the standard, which just says what? Understand and interpret. This one gets a little bit more specific with the how well formulaic language, simple, predictable texts, right? So you get a little information here about what sort of resources and what type of activities, perhaps, but we need to get even more specific, right? We need to like, what topic? A variety of topic. Here's where we decide, oh, this is a unit on family. So our topic is going to be family. That starts telling us what kind of words and phrases that we need to use and what kind of communicative strategies we need. Knowledge like how we say hello to an elder, vice a small child, or our parent, or a sister, etc. All right, I'm going to stop there. Questions, comments?
Thank you for sharing this. I didn't know they have updated 2024 version, so I'm looking into the difference, but that will take me some time firstly.
Oh, and you can use the updated or you can use the older ones. I'm not going to be picky about that. But yes, they just, I mean, literally like yesterday, I think, updated it to 2024.
Oh, that's very good to know. I'm excited. I want to know the difference now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions or thoughts on this? Any comments? Is this all new? Is this overwhelming? Does this make sense? I don't want to bore you to tears, but I also don't want to leave you in the dust, as they say. I don't want to go too fast, but I don't want to go too slow and bore you either. So I need feedback. Oh, goodness, it's all quiet. All right, I'm going to move forward then. So let's talk about good alignment. Remember, alignment is making sure that what you tell the students they need to learn, that's the standards and the objectives, that what you tell them they need to learn is what you assess, what you teach, and have them, do activities on, and the resources you provide. So as an example of a good alignment, and this is a basic example, students understand and interpret with the performance descriptor. These are the two things we previously just talked about on the prior slide. So we could have an objective of the student will be able to recognize simple written words and phrases related to hobbies and pastimes. So here we've narrowed the topic and we're talking about recognizing simple words and phrases on a specific topic. So that's an objective. It's a pretty basic objective. And it's pretty, I think, standard for most first year language classes of any language, really. So how do we assess this? That's the next part of the backward design. After we decide what the outcome is, what the objective is, as we decide what will that look like, the assessment, how we will assess them, the task, it's called by different names. And I don't want anybody to get hung up on the specific words, right? But the acceptable evidence of how do you know that the students learned this thing that you said that they were going to learn. Acceptable evidence, aka, in the words of ACTFL and Star Talk, the interpretive task that you'll be summatively assessing. That's end of unit, end of the learning event or learning events, how you will assess them. So in this case, I picked a simple one because this is about just showing alignment examples. Students will read a story and identify the keywords and phrases related to hobbies and pastimes. I mean, the objective tells us the task that they have to accomplish that we will be assessing. Now, a few things before I go any further. Every standard can have several objectives. Like this one's on written. You might have another one on spoken, right? You might have another one specific to pronunciation and another one specific to, well, not for this particular, sorry. I got carried away. For the other standard on interpersonal, where you might focus on pronunciation or many other things. Anyway, so we have the task now. Now the task, this is the thing the students will be doing that we're going to assess. This tells us, this guides us in picking our resources. If they have to identify keywords and phrases, we need to teach them those keywords and phrases. So we have vocabulary lists, for example. If they're going to read a story to identify those keywords and phrases, we need some stories for them to read and practice with on the theme, on the topic. And the activities should all be geared towards helping them do the final task. Now, admittedly, this one's basic, but we want to provide them a little direct instruction. We want to tell them about the words. We want to help them read the words and so on. We could read while they read along in the text. And so they are establishing connections between the words and what they see on the page. Practice quizzes and so on. So this is a good alignment example. Everything works and works toward and supports the standards and objectives you've identified. Now, to contrast that, just really quickly, we'll look at a bad alignment example. And honestly, this happens more often than we all would care to admit. We have the same standard. We have the same objective, recognize simple written words, but then the task is discuss a hobby or pastime. That is not understanding written and spoken language, not as an interpretive task, right? This discussion is two-way, that's interpersonal, not interpretive. And the activities of listening to audio content, well, this is about written words. So audio content that doesn't apply to this objective. This is poorly aligned. We're asking the students to recognize written words, but we're giving them audio content. Okay, so that's bad alignment here. We want to try and avoid that. All right, I'm going to stop. Questions, comments?
Bethany, could you go back to the good alignment example?
Of course.
Thank you.
There you go. And I will post these slides right there along with the recording links. So you'll have a copy. You'll be able to get a copy of them. Now remember, this is one objective with just one small task. When you start developing a lesson unit or an entire course, you might have this one standard with several different objectives that you're addressing throughout, which means many different tasks that you're going to summatively assess, and therefore many, many different tasks and activities that you're going to formatively assess, right? You don't want to do a one and done. They should get practice, and you should assess and give feedback, more practice and more feedback, and then some sort of final summative assessment where all of that practice now lends itself to them doing much, much better on the summative assessment. And of course, language, we're constantly building on it, so it never really ends. But questions, comments, thoughts? And notice we haven't even talked about technology yet, because we don't really start talking about technology until, I mean, this is the same process regardless of what modality you're using, right? This could be for a face-to-face class. This could be for an online or a blended or a hybrid class. It doesn't matter. Process is the same. No questions. Has everybody had a chance to see this?
Bethany, I was a little late for class. I'm sorry about that, but I just wanna make sure I am on the same page with everyone. So we're talking about goal objectives and the performance descriptor, which come from Apple, I guess, and that will guide us for our final projects. Is that what we're doing?
Yes. So in the final project, you're designing that. I don't have the page up. Hold on. In your final project, we did week 1 and overview, and then week 2 DEI considerations and what modality. And this week, we're starting the backward design process. So we need to identify the world readiness standards that we're going to use, and the theme, we'll be talking about that in a minute. The instructional goals. Tomorrow, these couple of things are today. On Thursday, we'll look at performance assessments, instructional goals. Friday, we'll look at can-do statements and so on. Okay. But that's this week, pretty much all this week. That's what we're talking about, is the backward design process, which is in the readings, starting with the world readiness standards. And we're looking at performance descriptors, so we can just talk a little bit about novice, intermediate, advanced levels and so on. And then instructional goals. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Is my beach scene refreshing for everybody? I decided to come out of space and go onto the beach. All right, let's see. All right, we are about on time. All right, I'm going to let you think about that. We're going to take 10 minutes. So it's 6:42 p.m. So you can go and get a drink or get a snack or something and come back by 6:52 p.m. All right, for us to continue. Meanwhile, I'll pause the recording and hang out here in case anybody has any questions. Resume and talk about doing a backward design. So what's the first thing that we want to do with our lesson planning in backward design mode here? We want to identify the world readiness standards. So let's go look at that. all of you have kind of brainstormed ideas already for your final projects, your lesson units that you're working on. So anybody want to jump in and say like which standard or standards they think that their idea is centering on? Anybody? All right. Do we want to pick on mine? Does it make you more comfortable if we pick on my ideas first? And I'm okay with that.
You can use mine too if you want to.
Pardon?
You can use mine too if you want to. Mine is to rent an apartment in Beijing. I think that's
Right. Renting an apartment. Okay, so which standards do you think you'll be tackling with that unit?
I'm thinking communication.
Okay. And that's going to be primarily interpersonal, right? They're going to
Yeah.
Are they going to be talking with the realtor and
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start with that one, interpersonal communication. So we have learners interact and negotiate meaning in spoken, signed, or written conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Oops. I got my Reverso app. I can't live without it. All right. Let us add a new slide. Slide. New. I'll just put that down here. All right. So that's the standard 1.1. So now what level of learner are we talking about here? Let me scroll back up so we can get to. We talking about intermediate or novice or advanced?
Intermediate.
Intermediate. And so for one of your performance descriptors, are we going to look at speaking or listening?
Speaking.
All right, so I'm going to go to intermediate level speaking. And we have, of course, intermediate low, intermediate mid, intermediate high, but let's just go to the overall performance descriptor right there for this. And again, with my Reverso. All right. So there is the performance descriptor. And we are well on our way on the backward design process. Let's see, I'm going to put our theme in here. Where is my brain not working? I'll just do this. Theme, renting an apartment. It's not an essential question really, but we'll use it as a theme. Okay, so what sort of objectives can we address with this? Because that would be the next step. Writing some specific objectives. Any thoughts, Ihan?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. We can have a moment of silence while you think.
Yeah.
And while you're thinking, I will just tell everybody. So these are the kind of this is the process that you're going to be working through for your own units, right? You talked about the general idea. For example, I talked about, oh, not that one. Mine was hobbies. right? Hobbies and pastimes. Hobbies and pastimes. And for novice learners. So mine would start off with maybe interpretive and standards. Maybe listening at the novice level. Understands words and phrases, yada, yada, yada. So that's where I would start with mine. And you need to think about where you're going to start with yours. What standard on what performance descriptor for the level and the communication skill, like reading, listening, speaking, writing, and then narrow it down farther from there to the objective. All right.
So I guess my objective has to be in the speaking skills, right? Because that's the right expresses oneself and participates in conversations. Yeah, it has to be speaking. So the objective will be the student will be able to hold a conversation with a native, well, with a real estate agent in the target language or in Mandarin to find apartment that meet his or her needs to live in Beijing. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. And you can actually have multiple objectives. And notice, for example, this is about negotiating meaning in spoken, signed, or written conversations to share information, reactions, feelings, yada, yada, yada. And I mean, we picked for the whatchamabobber, for the performance descriptor, we picked conversations, right? So the spoken part of this, but you could have others like they understand the contract and
Right.
and so on. But that would be a different performance descriptor. So yes, this one would be discussions, like the student will be able to speak about to discuss terms related to apartment renting. And then another one on something else. So you could have several.
Okay.
May I have a question, please?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, that is not question. That is my little bit suggestions. I recalling how we rent the apartment in Shanghai, and normally we just go to the website to look for some new apartment is more suitable in terms of the location, in terms of the renting fee, and some environment. And then when I choose some potential apartment, and after that, just make phone calls to the agency and to make reservations for visit. And then we start with the conversation. So I think, in my opinion, possibly these objectives can be divided into two parts. One is reading, and another is a conversation. So that's in this case. From my point of view, we start with the reading some news in the internet, in the website, to assess the students' reading proficiency. And then we go to do some conversations with the agency and to assess the students, conversation or speaking proficiency. So this is my point of view. That is more, how to say, more assessed with the the real life story, real life situation.
No,
Sorry.
that's great. And you're absolutely right. There are many standards many standards that could be addressed with this wonderful task, because renting an apartment is like the task that will be assessed, right? And there are many different, it also is the goal or the objective, but so it involves, like you mentioned, it could involve everything. For example, under connections with other disciplines, being able to read a map and understand which part of the city you would like to focus your search on. There's connections, reading a map. So that's a standard there. Build, reinforce, expand their knowledge of other disciplines while using language. Okay. Then cultures. What is renting an apartment in Shanghai or Beijing? How is that different than renting an apartment in LA or New York? So you've got that standard that you could address. You've got the interpersonal, the discussions with the realtor. You also have the interpretive, as in reading those review, looking at those apps or seeing where the sites, where the apartments are posted and being able to read that and narrow it down to a few that you want to check out. You could even do presentational skills where you tell somebody else, this is the steps that I took to find the apartment. So the point is that most of you will have multiple standards that you can address through the lesson unit idea that you have. And you could make it as big or as small as you want for your final project, as long as there's at least 2 or more learning activities that will be assessed on the same set of related objectives. So great. Thank you for bringing that up, Alice.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to everybody? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So for my example with the hobbies and pastimes, you know, the fairly typical like middle of the semester kind of unit. This could involve interpersonal communication because, hey, I'm going to invite somebody over for the weekend to engage in some sort of hobby or pastime with me. It could be interpretive, as in, I want to learn a new hobby or pastime and I am reading about it in the target language so that I can learn how to do it. Maybe I want to learn how to play Go or something, which I do, but I don't think I want to tackle it in the target language yet. But anyway, that's interpretive. And maybe I want to tell others about my cool hobby, my cool new hobby that I just learned, presentational. I could relate it to cultures. I could get the students talking about hobbies, typical hobbies in China, in this case, as opposed to typical hobbies in the United States for teenagers. If the hobby is, well, like Go is strategy and strategic thinking and so on, we could make connections. And so there's another standard. So most tasks in ACTFL terms, ACTFLs, integrated performance assessment tasks, these kind of real world things like Ihan's renting an apartment, right? That it really involves everything to do with all of these standards. And it's just up to us to decide which bits we're going to choose, which parts we're going to focus on and why. Because you might focus on interpersonal and acquiring information from diverse perspectives in one unit, and then focus on, or one set of activities in a unit, and focus on interpretive and language comparisons in another activity, and so on. So sky's the limit. we're going to do more on actual specific learning objectives, writing out learning objectives, because that involves Bloom's taxonomy and a whole bunch of other things. Anybody familiar with Bloom's taxonomy in this group? Bloom's taxonomy? No? Okay. It's okay if you're not. Bloom's taxonomy is where we get those verbs about discuss, describe, explain, compare, contrast, all of those learning objective type of verbs. They come from a taxonomy that basically describes deeper and deeper levels of understanding of something. So to be able to memorize something, to remember something is the lowest level of understanding. To be able to describe it to somebody else is the next level. Being able to apply that understanding in a certain way is the next level, and so on and so forth. So Bloom's taxonomy is how we describe in more detail the levels of understanding with a specific thing. And that'll be more on Thursday, after you've had time to really think about the standards and the descriptors. Let me post those links into the chat again. A couple more things. Let me see. In the, reading with the hypothesis activity, it goes through this process, identifying the standards, thinking about a theme or essential question. We didn't do that too much today, and then we started on instructional goals. So let's talk about themes and essential questions just briefly. So you don't have to create thematic units, but it can be very helpful. In teaching and learning of any subject, storytelling can be very useful. It helps us remember things. It helps us understand things, complex ideas and concepts and skills. And if you come up with a theme or an essential question that helps drive everything you're doing, then you can essentially link all of your activities back to that theme or essential question. In essence, telling a story as something that helps connect everything together so that the students have a point of reference. So to link everything to. I'm going to use an example here of a theme. A topic of popular media and society, and my theme or essential question that we could build an entire year around, an entire semester around easily, a year easily too, probably. Does popular media reflect a society's norms and values? This is a good essential question, and you could do a lot of different lessons and activities around popular media, societal norms, societal values, and so on, and address all the standards at any level, novice, intermediate, advanced. But if you kept tying it back to this theme or essential question, everything you did, like, oh, you're studying vocabulary on popular media. So that could be anything from types of popular media, television shows, radio, podcasts, books, novels, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So you've got all of those. So you've got different things happening in those media. You've got all the vocabulary and concepts around norms and values and societal stuff, cultural differences, yada, yada, yada. And every single assignment could be tied back to this. This is just one example. You can pick your own theme or essential question. But it helps with those like story arcs, right? If you have a theme if you have an essential question and you're always relating back to that, it's like popular media itself, where every episode of a TV series has its own little story arc, and then it's part of a bigger story arc. And that keeps people engaged. I'm going to stop there for a second. Any thoughts? Have you ever worked with thematic units or essential questions as part of your lesson design? Anybody?
May I have a question, please, Matthew?
Yes, please.
I have two questions. One is regarding the theme. So in the past time, we used to use the ready textbooks, to our course teaching, and very seldomly we do the self-made. I mean, but in my opinion, for some topic, for some themes, the students seems not so interested in, and they are very reluctant to talk about that. At least they just talk on the surface. They don't like to go deeply, right? So, which course they just ask some very simple questions. They don't like to thinking too much about some what is called is how to say high quality questions, like some creation questions or some evaluation questions, right? And now my question is, in United States, I want to know if most of the teachers, to decide what kind of the topic for the students based on students' interest, students' favorite things, or they just decide by teacher themselves. Yeah, this is the first one. And the second one is regarding that, essential questions. For me, it's really up to now. I'm still sometimes struggling in this kind of essential questions. For me, it's not so easy to decide what kind of the essential questions for my instruction, right? Where I can ask, to the students. And this is from teacher's perspective. And from the student's perspective, I really do hope them to, to ask some questions. Not always, for most of the time in the class, in the language class, they are really just answer the teachers, questions. They love to answer, but they are really struggling in ask questions. So I'm really, a little bit, how to say, struggling in how we can promote students high quality questions, and based on I would say, how to say, based on what Bloom, how to say, taxonomy, Bloom taxonomy, right? Yeah. Two questions.
Okay, so first, in terms of our teachers or students picking the themes or the essential questions. Am I understanding that question correctly? Because sometimes I go off on a tangent.
Yeah, theme. I mean the topic.
Yeah,
unit topic. Who decide unit topic? Is it based on teachers' decision, or is based on the students' favorite things?
Yeah, that's really good question. So I've worked with a lot of teachers over the years, and I would have to say that K-12 tends to, more often than not, at least with the teachers I've worked with, they haven't necessarily been language teachers, but any kind of K-12 teacher, more often than not, tend to work with the students to come up with interesting themes, because as you noted, it's sometimes very difficult to pick a theme that's going to resonate with the kids. So they'll often involve the students in picking of the themes, of coming up with ideas, and maybe working with the students to figure out how to address the objectives that the teachers needs to address, but in the context of a theme that the student really wants to explore. Now, in higher ed, I would say that it's more teacher-centered in many, many areas. It's more teacher-centered, and they're more likely to be, well, be guided. The teachers are more likely to be guided by the textbook that they tend to choose. For example, some higher ed schools use integrated Chinese here. It's a textbook and a workbook, and there's all levels. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but it's nice because it's written using the ACTFL standards, performance descriptors, I can do statements, and all of that. And so they tend to pick the themes based on what they're experiencing with the textbook that they chose. Whereas Arabic teachers, for example, might use this textbook. And this is written in an entirely different way. And it's not themes, but tasks. So they might go with a task-based approach and not even address the concept of themes at all. So it really depends on what textbook they pick in higher ed. And the second question was?
Yes. Second question is about the, let's say, is about how to promote students to ask some high quality questions, not just talk about very simple, not just ask some simple questions, right? Like, is it, or does it, something like that. I like to ask some open-ended questions or some more high quality questions based on the Bloom taxonomy. It's more high level, not just the low level.
Right. Yeah, getting students to explore. Sometimes, have you heard of a strategy called Socratic method or Socratic dialogue? I'm putting it in the chat. It is a way of asking questions to get students to think more deeply and ask more deeper questions. It's not, I'll see if I can find some resources, but you could also Google it perhaps and see if you could find something. It's a really great way of encouraging cognitive presence through the use of more and more and more involved questioning. You, Ihan, you use the integrated Chinese?
I do.
Do you like it?
I do. I've been teaching for a long time. So I basically use the textbook as how do I say, like a blueprint, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course I have my own materials over the years. So I do use the textbook. I like their thematic unit.
Mm-hmm.
Those topics are very well, real life kind of topics, and there's a lot of room to expand on. And I think Alex earlier on asked a good question about how you do we ask students to come up with the themes, or do teachers have more say on that? In my class, like you described earlier, I give them a broader sense what we're going to talk about. So, for example, in lesson 12, I think it was dining, right? So I would say, okay, this dining chapter, but we have a few options. We can explore Chinese cuisine, or if we in that class we have more students who have like different cultural backgrounds, I'll ask them to explore more on their own culture, but we're learning in Chinese. So I think I usually give my students, promote student choice or student agency, I guess, so that they will more invested on it, and they'll ask good questions too. So that relate to what we talked about yesterday, active learning. Give students agency, give them their ownership, and they will be more willing to study and work on their own. and actually bring more back to class.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Yihan, if you don't mind, Miss Hanla.
Yes, yeah, 韩老师。
Do you choose? Do you have you know, like when you give them the topic to choose about the food, do you limit them only for Chinese food, or can they choose anything else like American pizza? You know.
This is good. They have pizza every day. Why don't we learn about pizza, right? Why don't we learn about Italian? We call it 意大利面, right? Italian noodle. So we learn noodle and we know Italian. We know from chapter 1 when we introduce each other, we say, oh, I'm Italian, I'm American, or I'm Irish, you know. So they know the vocabulary already. And yeah, I let them, I give my students maybe too much freedom.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you.
And I know that lesson design can be a lot of work. So relying on a textbook and then supplementing it, it can be great. And also maybe designing 70% of the course with a textbook and leaving 30% for more student agency is another way to go, and make them work a little bit on being a part of the course design process and making suggestions, you know, within their developmental level, of course. I know if you're working with elementary school students, it gets a little bit more challenging in some regards, but doing a kind of a balanced approach where you plan out some and leave some space for them to plan out some could be fun and exciting. But I see that we're at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, 5:30 here. That is all that I have for today. Thursday, we will start looking, we'll delve more deeply into writing learning objectives and some of the other parts of the backward design process, to help you complete those week 3 integrated performance assessment kind of planning that we're doing. All right. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop here, but I will hang out in case you have any questions. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.